After years of fighting for justice, Pandem Mlalahoi was gone, but the suffering of his family was only beginning. In this part 4, hope slowly turns into desperation as poverty scattered the children in different directions, while Mkapendeza and little Dick struggle to survive in a world where even a court victory cannot protect the poor. And this time, the tragedy becomes far worse than anyone expected. After the death of Pandem Mlalahoi, the family continued living in unbearable hardship. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and still the bill of cost of the Court of Appeal judgment remained unheard. The Court of Appeal had already declared that Pandem Mlalahoi's eviction was unlawful. The court had already ordered compensation. The court had already recognized the family's ownership rights. But outside the courtroom, nothing changed. The family continued waiting, waiting for justice, waiting for relief, waiting for a law powerful enough to protect ordinary people from powerful institutions. 8 painful months passed. Then one morning, the court finally announced the hearing of the bill of costs. Mkapendeza and the family lawyer attended the hearing session, and after active arguments from both sides, the taxing master finally awarded a total of 95 million ngananas in favor of the decree holder. Fortunately, 3 weeks later, the execution application was also heard. Again, Mkapendeza attended together with the family lawyer. Inside the courtroom, the lawyer stood firmly before the judge and narrated the family's suffering. The unlawful confiscation of the shop rooms, the destruction of the family, Pandem's death, the unpaid compensation, and the continued occupation of the property by the local council despite the Court of Appeal judgment. The courtroom remained silent. Even the judge appeared emotionally disturbed by the story. Finally, the presiding judge delivered the ruling.
Execution order is hereby granted in favor of the applicant, Pandem Mlalahoi.
For a brief moment, hope returned again. Mkapendeza closed her eyes in relief. She believed the suffering was finally ending. But once again, reality proved different. The local council is a government entity, and under the law, government property could not easily be attached or seized to enforce payments or other court remedies. No officials came to vacate the premises. No compensation was paid. No rent arrears were released. The shop rooms remained under the control of the local council despite the existence of a valid court order. The same buildings Pandem Mlalahoi had built through years of sweat and sacrifice continued generating income for others, while his own family starved. Slowly, the execution order became nothing more than papers inside a dusty court file. A judgment without enforcement. A victory without relief. A right without protection. Back home, suffering deepened further. Pandem's elderly mother became weaker each day. Years earlier, she had sacrificed her village land, hoping her son would one day restore the family dignity. But now, Pandem was gone. The land was gone. The home was gone. And the promise of justice still remained distant. Because of untreated illness and extreme poverty, the old woman eventually passed away quietly in town. She never returned to her village again. She never saw her ancestral land again. Like her son Pandem, she was buried through government assistance because the family could not afford burial expenses. After the deaths of Pandem and his mother, the family completely fell apart. Poverty scattered the children in different directions until they no longer knew each other's whereabouts. One by one, they disappeared, searching for survival wherever they could find it. The once united family dissolved slowly under the weight of suffering. Pandem's son Mavea moved to a nearby town. There he befriended a young man who sold goat soup by the roadside. The two struggled daily with very little capital. One day, driven by hunger and desperation, they stole someone's goat. The matter was reported to the police, and both were arrested. Later, the goat owner told the police,
"I am willing to forgive them if they compensate me for the goat."
the amount required was 100,000 nananas. Mavea's friend was fortunate. His father rushed to the police station and paid his son's share of the compensation. But Mavea had nobody. He could not raise even 50,000 nananas. The case proceeded to court. Mavea was found guilty of theft and sentenced to 5 years' imprisonment. Another life destroyed by the same chain of suffering. Without his father alive to guide or rescue him, Mavea stood alone before the court and was sentenced to a harsh 5 years' imprisonment. Had he possessed financial support like his friend, he might have regained his freedom. Had he known influential people capable of influencing the trial magistrate, perhaps he would never have received such a severe sentence for stealing a goat whose unpaid share of compensation amounted to only 50,000 nagananas. In painful reality, every single year of imprisonment became equivalent to merely 10,000 nagananas, a punishment many would view as deeply oppressive and disproportionate to the offense itself. Only Mkapendeza remained behind in the small rented room, together with her grandson Dick, the son of her second-born daughter, Eglinsdal. Alone with her grandson, Mkapendeza continued hoping that one day the court remedies would finally be paid so she could reunite her scattered children again. But that day never came. To survive, Mkapendeza moved from house to house, begging for part-time work. Sometimes neighbors gave her laundry to wash. Sometimes she carried water. Sometimes she cleaned compounds. Other days she was chased away. Little Dick became severely malnourished and frequently sick. His poor health forced Mkapendeza to spend more time caring for him instead of searching for work. Eventually, she failed to pay rent for 2 consecutive months. One early morning, the landlord knocked heavily on her door.
"When will you pay the rent?"
Mkapendeza explained tearfully that she was still waiting for compensation ordered by the court. The landlord listened briefly, then warned her.
"You have 3 months. If you fail to pay, I will evict you and recover my money through legal procedure."
3 months passed quickly. Still, no compensation came. 1 week before the deadline expired, the landlord reminded her again. That day, Mkapendeza remained seated silently inside the room from morning until evening, thinking desperately about where she and Dick would sleep after eviction. Then she remembered her son, Mavea. Perhaps she could go and live with him. But after searching for information about him, she received devastating news. Mavea had been imprisoned for stealing a goat. The news shattered her completely. She fainted briefly from emotional pain. Mkapendeza now spent long, painful nights thinking about what would happen to her and her grandson Dick once they were evicted from the tiny rented room within the coming days. Sleep abandoned her completely. Sometimes, in moments of overwhelming despair, she even thought about taking poison, just as her husband Pandem had done. But each time such thoughts entered her mind, fear immediately followed. If I die too, who will take care of little Dick? She would ask herself silently. And so, despite the pain consuming her heart, she continued struggling to stay alive for the sake of her grandson.
Respect the law, defend justice, protect families.
Please subscribe to our channel and follow the continuation of this story in Part 5.